Dan Ige takes on Patricio Pitbull this Saturday on the main card of UFC 318. And this is a veteran versus veteran matchup. You know, Dan Ige been in the UFC for a long time, has a lot of high-level experience taking on Patricio Pitbull, who's been in Bellator for a very long time. Got to be up there in conversations for Bellator GOAT. You know, he's been in that organization for so long, been a champ, maybe even a double champ, but he's been in Bellator since 2010, fought the who's who over there, been really good. Recently fighting in PFL and Ryzen as well. I wish he would have made the jump to the UFC a little bit earlier, maybe 5-10 years ago. I think he really could have made a run. But now he's just, you know, a little bit older, a lot of wear and tear on the body, a lot of tread on the tires. Taking on Dan Ige, who, you know, is probably one of the best guys that the UFC has at 145 pounds. Like I said, fought a lot of really good guys, a lot of good wins. And only losing to the best of the best. So we'll see how this one plays out. But Dan Ige, 33 years old, 5'7" with a 71-inch reach. Patricio Freire, 38, 5'6" with a 65.5-inch reach. So Dan Ige, he's going to be 5 years younger, still in his prime. And he's going to have a 5.5-inch reach advantage in this one, which I think is going to be pretty substantial. Ige is a jiu-jitsu black belt, judo brown belt. He was a D3 wrestler, great boxing. He has hands the size of a middleweight, I've heard. And I've heard people say Dan Ige hits harder than Ige Topuria, which is just crazy. But a lot of knockout potential in Dan Ige. Tons of KO power, tons of experience. He does really well exchanging in the pocket and kind of throwing punches while his opponents go and kind of catching them in those transitions and those counters. Rips to the body very well. Good leg kicks. And again, probably one of the biggest power punchers at 145 pounds. Patricio Pitbull, former Bellator champ, you know, a high-level jiu-jitsu black belt. I heard him saying recently that he could have been, you know, a jiu-jitsu world champion if he would have had the money to kind of travel and go to these tournaments and, you know, get a little bit better looks on the ground. But he threw up that armbar against, who was it? Was it Yair in his last fight? Threw up that armbar after he got hurt. That was just lightning fast and almost caught him with it. So no slouch off the ground, but likes to do a lot of his work on the feet. I think he just got neck surgery as well. And he says he feels like 10 years younger. He had some issue to do with his medulla. But we'll see how he performs. You know, he didn't look the greatest against Yair Rodriguez. But we'll see. You know, great calf kicks, feints well, stands really tall when he's throwing his strikes, has good counters, has really patient pressure, kind of picks his shots. Fought at a really measured pace in his outing before his UFC debut against Jeremy Kennedy. He's just very confident in his one-punch knockout power. And kind of takes him a little bit to get started, though, and doesn't get a lot of volume out there. It seems to be kind of lacking urgency at times. So I'm going to have to go with Dan Ige in this one. You know, Pitbull, he was just... I think he's just going to be waiting to counter the entire time against Dan Ige, who's going to be the longer guy, and I just think he's going to be kind of beating up Patricio Pitbull on the outside. Pitbull hasn't shown the best chin as of late. He was dropped by Jeremy Kennedy in that fight in Bellator. He was knocked out in the fight before that by Chihiro Suzuki in Ryzen, and then he was dropped by Yair in his most recent fight. So I'm wondering if his chin is kind of starting to go. He was looking kind of frustrated in his last fight, complaining about fouls, complaining about this and that, as he just wasn't able to get really any success going against Yair. And I'm just wondering if, you know, these wars and all these fights that he's had is just kind of starting to catch up to him, where he doesn't really have the explosivity, the confidence in his chin. This will be his 45th professional fight. You know, Ige is just younger. He's got more experience at the UFC level, fighting really good competition. I wouldn't say fighting the better competition. Obviously, Dan Ige, he's fought tons of really good guys. Evloev, Bryce Mitchell, Feely, Diego Lopez, Cater, Barboza, Lerone Murphy, coming off of a win over Sean Woodson. Kind of a comeback win. He wasn't having a lot of success, but then eventually got the knockout over Sean Woodson, who was just much bigger than him. But, you know, Patricio Pitbull's fought a lot of really good guys in Bellator. AJ McKee twice, Carvalho, Chandler, back when Chandler was good, Benson Henderson, Strauss, Corrales, Curran. You know, a lot of really good guys over there. But I think Dan Ige, you know, he's got the experience in the UFC. He's got more momentum coming off of that win, whereas Patricio Pitbull coming off of, he's 1-3 in his last 4 fights, spanning about 2.5 years. So not a lot of momentum going into this one. Ige is going to have a 5.5-inch reach advantage. I think he's going to be able to go tit for tat with him on the ground if it does go there, just because he's, you know, high-level judoka and jiu-jitsu black belt as well. He always fights bigger guys than Ige always fights bigger guys than him, and seems to have a lot of success doing it. So now he's going to be fighting a guy who's smaller than him, who's older than him. He's going to have the size, the reach, the youth advantage. I just don't see where Pitbull kind of wins this fight. You know, I don't see him being able to take Ige down. I don't see him being able to sting Ige on the feet. I think Ige is going to be the guy with a little bit more power, a little bit more consequence coming from his strikes. And I think Ige will be, you know, he'll be the one pushing forward, getting more offense out there and landing more. Just because Pitbull kind of the last few fights I've seen, he's just been kind of waiting. He's been a little bit too patient. Guys are getting out in front of him, kind of getting him frustrated to where he's just fighting from behind the entire time. And that's not the way that you want to fight somebody like Ige, who can put your lights out at any second, and is just going to be getting tons of respect on the feet. So maybe Pitbull gets some takedowns and controls. But if he can't do that against Yair, I don't think he's going to do that against Ige. You know, Ige is light years ahead of Yair on the ground. And that's kind of an MMA math thought right there. If you can't do it to this guy, you can't do this guy. But I stand by it. I think Ige is underrated on the ground. And again, if you're not able to hold down Yair, who's more of a kickboxer style, doesn't really do a lot of grappling, then I don't think you're going to be able to do that against Dan Ige. So I think Dan Ige, I think he can knock out Pitbull. I do. You know, he's been shown to get hurt on the feet as of late against, you know, Jeremy Kennedy, who's a much less opponent than Dan Ige. Got knocked out by another guy in Suzuki over in Ryzen. 13-6 Suzuki. You know, Jeremy Kennedy 19-7. So if these guys are getting you, if these guys are hurting you or knocking you out and getting you out of there, I think Dan Ige is more than able to get you out of there as well. So I think Dan Ige can get the knockout. If not, I think he'll be landing the more consequential shots, hurting Pitbull on the feet, and just overall controlling the fight on the feet in order to get a decision. But I am going to go with Dan Ige to get this one done. I haven't looked at the odds. Ige is a -180. I would think it would have been a little bit steeper than that. Patricio Pitbull +150. It's closer than I thought it would be, honestly. But I'm going to go with Dan Ige to get this one done. Thanks.